Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Chains Are Open, Now What? I'm Brian Choi, Managing Partner and CEO of the Food Institute, which is partnering with DMA to host this webinar. We at the Food Institute have been serving the food industry for over 90 years. The company started in 1928, and many of you know us for our newsletters and webinars. This year, we're making some exciting new changes at the company. Here are just a few of the highlights. Next month in July, we'll be revamping the Food Institute website to include more interactive content. We'll also be introducing a new Food Institute report for our professional and e-members. Thirdly, we'll also be providing our Weekender newsletter as a standalone product, so please consider becoming a member or subscriber. And lastly, we'll also be delivering more podcast and webinar content, and our reach is over 10,000 members in the food industry, in manufacturing, retail, and food service. So if you're interested in becoming a sponsor, presenter, or advertiser with us, please contact me or visit foodinstitute.com for more info. I'll now pass it over to Jeanette, Food Institute's Marketing Director, who will introduce today's guest.
Thanks, Brian. Today we have moderating this event is Pat Mulhern, CEO and President of DMA in Schaumburg, Illinois. DMA is the multi-unit food service distribution sales and marketing arm for 13 of the largest regional food service distributors in North America. Prior to DMA, Pat spent 17 years at U.S. Food Service, his last two positions as president of Monarch Food Group and president of the North Star Food Service. He also served on the board of U.S. Food Service from 2006 to 2011. We're also pleased to be joined today by Joe Pawlak, managing principal at Technomic, Inc., who has 30 years of extensive food industry experience at both consulting and packaged goods manufacturing. He's been a frequent featured speaker for countless national and global food industry events, including the International Food Service Manufacturers Association, National Restaurant Association, Global Restaurant Leadership Conference, and other industry conferences. And hopefully, we'll also be happy to welcome Peter Moscondis, owner and CEO of Nicholas & Company. Peter graduated from University of Utah with a BA in Economics and Family and Consumer Studies with a minor in Greek. Prior to that, Peter began his career at Nicholas & Company at 12 years old. Peter serves as board member for IFTA, Independent Marketing Alliance, Marcon, DMA, and Women's Food Service Forum. I'd also like to remind everybody that this webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out to all attendees following the event. There'll also be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please submit any questions you have via the Q&A window on your screen at any point during the webinar. And now I'm going to turn it over to Pat to get us started.
Good morning. Thank you, Jeanette. Hopefully we'll have our good friend Peter Mouskondis on here. He's experienced a little bit of technical difficulty. Not sure what that is, but he's coming to us. Will come to us live from Utah when we get him on the phone. As Jeanette mentioned, I'm Pat Mulhern. I am the CEO at DMA. This is the first of a series of webinars that we'll be hosting here. I want to thank the Food Institute for hosting the webinar for us. I also want to, ahead of Peter getting on, thank him for joining and agreeing to do this. And of course, having Joe Pawlak on board is terrific as well. So what we're going to try to do is spend the next 50 minutes on where we think we might be heading in the food service industry, and along the way, leave you with a bold thought or two. Getting ready for the webinar yesterday, I realized that today would have been the 77th game of the season for my Detroit Tigers, my native team. In every normal year, it would have been game 77. To my Chicago friends, my New York friends, my LA friends, I know it would have. We've been trying to win our 15th or 16th game out of the first 77 today, but we would have been eliminated from the playoffs. But I poke fun at it just to say that this is no normal time we're in right now. So on the webinar today, our goal here is to be able to get out in front of the industry, and I'll test and probe Joe and Peter a little bit on how they see things taking shape here the next 6 and 12 months. All of us are getting more data, more webinars, more contact points than we've had. But most of what we're talking about is what happened yesterday, not what's going to happen tomorrow. So I'll try to take Joe and Peter and myself and give you a few thoughts on how we see the industry changing here in the coming 6 months, coming year. At DMA, we're super fortunate. We've been in business for 32 years. We're in the multi-unit supply chain business, meaning we supply hotels, hospitals, and a good proportion of the chain restaurants in the industry. Our brands are recognizable to customers we service, and the beautiful thing about what we're doing here is we're in a strong network of regional distribution companies, 13 of them in total, that are all in good shape. And, for us, evolving to where our customers is going are super important, and we're strong and we're open for business. So we're in a very, very fortunate place here at DMA. I think our biggest goal here is to make sure we're doing the things we need to keep our customers healthy, keep our customers safe, keep our customers moving forward in what's an incredibly difficult time. I mentioned this, our first webinar. At the end, I'll talk about our second one, which we're excited about, but staying focused to where we're at today, we'll promise to convene key players in the industry in our webinars as we're doing with Joe and Peter today. Hopefully we're bold. I want to talk a lot about collaboration. I think it's going to be super important going forward, and also make sure that, in this great industry that we, step out in front of our customers and our manufacturers if we're in the distribution segment, that our manufacturers step out ahead of us as distributors and our customers, and that our customers are patient with us as we try to help all of you, survive and thrive going forward. So I thought, to be bold, before I turn it over to Joe, I'd throw a couple of thoughts out here. One of them is what we're calling the 3 Ds, which is digital, drive-through, and delivery. And so far, our customer base that has positioned themselves or been fortunate enough to have positioned themselves with the 3 Ds are thriving. So question going forward is, how do casual dining restaurants, how do fine dining restaurants, how do hotels, how do destination restaurants position themselves for 3 Ds, and at least 1 or 2 of the 3 Ds? Again, dining, I should say digital, drive-through, and delivery. It seems to be the winning formula now, and likely to be a winning formula for the next 18 months. Second thought is food away from home, or the restaurants as we've known them, all of us in the industry for all of these years, now it looks more like food away from home at home. So, we use the moniker FAFH for food away from home. We think that now becomes something more like food away from home at home, FAFH at H. 80% of the business now is about where most people are feeling the industry has settled, quite a bit less in some sectors and even more in some sectors, depending on your 3 Ds. But I would say that, if restaurants are going to survive and thrive, they're going to have to reinvent themselves no matter the sector they're in. So, to do business the way, we used to, I think everybody knows that won't work. When you open your doors and the dining rooms are reopened, it's not a winning formula. So we'll talk about that as we move along here. Well, let me stop. I want to kick it over to Joe. I've known Joe for a lot of years. He and I have been in this industry a long time. I've always thought of him as being kind of the right person to call, when you need to know what's going on today. And today, with this pace of change, the uncertainty we're all facing, the recovery, and being able to react with some confidence to what's out ahead of us, that's the survival of our business model. So with that, I'll let Joe take you through kind of his state of the industry. We'll see if we can get Peter queued up and have him talk a little bit about distribution, and then we'll turn it over to Q&A. So with that, Joe, I'll turn it to you.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it very much. Good morning, everybody. Again, thank you very much for having me today to the Food Institute as well as DMA. And what I want to do before we get started with our Q&A and panel session is kind of take you through what we see as the kind of the state of the industry as we see it relative to the restaurant business. So, the way we've developed this, if we kind of go to the next slide, is talking about what are some of the key themes as we see the business lying today. First of all, and I'll go through each of these as I progress. First of all, we kind of see what we call the start phase commencing. We develop what we call the 4 S's at Technomic as we see us digging out of this COVID, really a disaster for the business, and where we'll eventually end up. We've kind of moved to the next phase, which is what we call the start phase. We see that from a consumer and operator perspective that there is a view that this is not something that's going to be fixed right away relative to the industry. There's concern that we're in it for the long haul. Dine-in closures, certainly, as Pat mentioned, it certainly has changed the way that we're doing business today and certainly will be in the future. We talk about business survival, and I'll talk a little bit about how it's dubious for many operators. Not only the independents, which we know that are certainly hurting, but also we're seeing chains also falling into that category as well. Rising costs are also becoming a problem for operators as they're trying to reopen and navigate everything that else is going on from the top line perspective. And as we see it from a Technomic perspective, it's going to take some time for us to get the full recovery. And I'll discuss what we mean by full recovery as I get to that slide as well. So next slide, please. So the 4S process at Technomic, this is how we are looking at how companies should be thinking about their business strategically as we move forward and away from, COVID. I guess looking at, I think March 11th is kind of the day that everybody talks about as D-Day or Doomsday for the industry is when we started many of the shutdowns, is when we started the survival phase. This is where we are now. That doesn't mean where we are now because we certainly moved on to the start phase, but that's when we had the shutdowns of dine-in and that eventually hit just about the entire country, where operators and everybody in your channel were in survival mode. Do whatever we can to survive this COVID situation and certainly the big pressures of having no sales or virtually no sales within our business. So a lot of pivoting and changing gears going on. So right now what we're seeing is a start phase where we're seeing gradual reopenings of economies throughout the country, just about every state. Illinois, I think, is one of the last states now that is allowing dine-in within restaurants happening. So the industry is starting to get going again, not at full capacity because there are capacity constraints within many jurisdictions. But again, we're starting to get the industry going again. People are getting out and about. We're in the summer months where restaurant sales are stronger than during other seasonal periods. So we're starting to see the industry going again. The next phase, which we hope to see, is what we call the strengthen phase. And that typically is going to happen the start phase is going to take a while. The strengthen phase we see as when consumers either feel confident about COVID, meaning there's going to be some proven therapies around COVID, or we have a proven vaccine. And there's been some pretty positive comments coming out of Dr. Fauci, who is very well respected by consumers, saying that he expects that we all will have a vaccine by the end of the year or early next year, which is the earliest that I've heard him say since we've been following him. So that's good news. And industry recovery will truly happen at that point. That's when we start seeing that strengthening happening where we can start getting back to some normalized sense of business. And then we have a surge. So once that starts happening, the next is when we start getting back into long-term investment and growth. And that's also driven by the economy, where the economy gets back into positive form and we start seeing more long-term investment and growth relative to the food service industry. So let's talk a little bit about what's been going on with our business. Next slide, please. So certainly we've seen a big shift in our business. There's no doubt about it. We're basically an off-premise business right now. Over the past few months, 80% of the business has become off-premise. We've seen a number of restaurants, and based on some of our research, 42% who haven't had curbside pickup before have added it. 27% have added delivery. 26% have added takeout. That's the only way an operator is going to be able to survive or even keep their doors open during this time period is to offer something that's off-premise since the dine-in has been closed. So next slide. So also this whole movement towards off-premise and the success that operators have seen has also provided them some breathing room relative to reopening their dining rooms. So when we did a survey back and the date was on May 3rd, our May 3rd survey, the percentage of operators who are kind of chomping at the bit saying that once the mandate is lifted in our area, we're going to open immediately, almost immediately, that was 25%. Now, when we asked that same question in May 31st, that went down to 14%. And you can kind of look at the opposite side. On May 3rd, those that say they're going to take a wait and see approach was 12%, and then went up to 31% on May 31st. So again, this whole off-premise with the successful operators as well, we're going to be completely sure that we have our business all set up correctly before we're going to open up dining rooms. And being able to have a successful takeout off-premise business is allowing them this breathing room, giving them this a little bit more runway to take a little bit more time, so they make sure that everything is successful once they do open up their dining rooms. Now, also, we talk about operator confidence and how confident are they in business survival. This is also an issue. Next slide, please. So, in mid-April, when we asked the question, how confident are you in your business survival? On a top two box basis, 53% were at least somewhat confident. Same number in early June when we asked the question, 53%. But those that were very confident, that percentage declined by 9 percentage points. So again, there's a little bit, once things started opening up a bit, we did not see a lot of the quote-unquote pent-up demand that we expected in some areas of the country. Now, some of that also may be because in mid-April, many operators may have believed that once they started opening up, they would open up at 100% capacity. And now that they're opening up at, say, 25 or 50% capacity, or dining outdoor only for dine-in, that has made their confidence reduce quite a bit. And now we're seeing, bankruptcies occurring. People like, from a chain perspective, Chuck E. Cheese just announced their bankruptcy. If you haven't been checking the news over the last 24 hours. Soup Plantation, Sweet Tomatoes, Chapter 7, they're gone. They're liquidating as we speak. Bravo Italian, Maine's Paper on the distribution side. So again, there's still a lot of question mark from an operator. Are we going to be able to? Are we ever going to be able to weather this storm at the end of the day, given all the restrictions that are being placed on us, as well as how consumers feel about going back out to eat? Next slide, please. Next slide. Nope. Need to go back to. There we go. So then we have another issue that operators are facing, not only from a top line perspective, but now also from a cost perspective. They're feeling a higher cost overall. You look at PPE as an example and hypersanitization. These are costs that they're now incurring that they hadn't incurred in the past. Buying masks as an example, more gloves for servers, having hand gel as an example with hand sanitizers. These are not things that they had in the past, and now they have to offer within their operations. Packaging, and now that they're more into off-premise, packaging is more important to them, especially in the full-service arena. Food costs are going up. We know the stories about meat costs, beef costs, pork costs, poultry costs going up, and also labor in some cases. Now that they have to have individuals responsible for watching all of these sanitization efforts and all these areas relative to COVID safety within their operations. They maybe in the past, given the current situation, they could eliminate one person or a position because of the situation, but now they have to keep that position in their operations because they have to have somebody watching over everything that's happening relative to COVID, making sure that the policies are being administered as well as being followed. Next question, next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about what we see in the industry and what we expect going forward. Now, at Technomic, we have developed 3 different scenarios. We've got a best case, worst case, and middle case. Best case looks at us, and I'll just very, quickly talk about what that means. Basically, it says that we will see a vaccine for COVID by the end of the year or beginning of next year. But it also implies that we will not have a second wave of COVID that will require massive reclosing of the economy. Now, our worst case implies that we're going to have reclosures of the economy, as well as a vaccine not being available until later next year. And our mid case is kind of the middle of the two. So just looking at the data here, you see that, this year we're going to have pretty significant declines, and this is the overall industry, not just restaurants. Our best case in the industry is going to be down 18%. Our worst case is down 27%. We will have somewhat of a recovery next year. You see some pretty solid growth rates. But keep in mind with these growth rates, even though you're declining by 17.7% in 2020 and then you're gaining 20.5%, doesn't mean you're ahead of the game. Just the way that the percentages work in terms of increasing and decreasing. If you compare those percentages between 2021 and 2019, you're still down 1% when you're comparing 2021 and 2019 on a best case scenario. And then if you look at our middle case, we're down 10%, which is kind of the number we're working with right now. We will be looking at some reforecasting once some of the second quarter data comes out. So right now, we think we're kind of in that middle case scenario right now relative to whatever is going on in the industry. Next slide. So just to kind of show you what we've done and what we've lost, and I'm showing you this both in nominal and real dollars. And now just to give you a sense of what that means, nominal dollars means dollars that include inflation, and constant dollars means the dollars as of 2019 that excludes inflation. So if you go back, and again, we're using 2019 as our base year here, we have lost in 1 year on a nominal basis. We've gone from $819 billion in the industry down to $636 billion. So you can see that, that's a pretty drastic decrease. And then in constant dollars down to $620 billion. And again, you're looking at almost a $200 billion decrease in constant dollars. Now, just to kind of give you a perspective of that, where that puts us on the continuum of when was the last time we hit those numbers relative to the size of the industry, on a nominal dollar basis, was 2012, when we hit $629 billion. So we've lost 8 years worth of value or growth of the industry on a nominal basis. Now, the real big news here is that looking at 2020, $620 billion on constant dollar or real dollar basis, you got to go back all the way to 1996 to hit that number. So we've lost, 24 years of value on a real basis based on this current situation. And that's my last slide.
Well, Joe, thank you for that. I have several questions for you. I think I'm going to hold them till later. I do want to ask you one, though.
Sure.
Your very first slide, you had the beginning, you had kind of the starting line, and you had that you are here on the starting line with survival on the left, and I believe you had strengthening on the right. It feels a bit this week like we're moving backwards from the start to survival. Do you feel that, or is it just, or where are we? Are we moving to the right or the left from the starting line?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you can kind of look at it both ways, and I'll give you both perspectives here, and then I'll give you my evaluation. I think almost from that we're moving forward towards strengthening. Even though, again, what's happening this week, we're seeing increases in COVID and cases in Texas, Arizona, Florida, and California. A lot of states are not eager to reclose their economies. I mean, and I think consumers on an overall basis would reject that, and it would be, I think, a big problem. So reclosing would be an issue. And say that we did, okay? Say that in say California decides we need to go back and reclose for a period of time. I think the industry is in a better position right now to mitigate that situation with all the repivoting with takeout, delivery, curbside, that they could, we're in a better place than we were before. We're kind of prepared. However, you can look at the flip side, that if, we do see some sort of closure, we have a lot of operators, and I can talk about chains specifically, that have already, they've already expended their revolving credit. There's not much more money to get there. A lot of them have pushed off their landlords and their other creditors on what they owe them, and there's going to be certain cash flow problems, so that's going to push more to the brink of bankruptcy. Also, government assistance may not be there like it has been in the past. So I think that, my view is we're still kind of in the start phase. I really don't believe, I think what we're seeing here is that consumers will be a little bit smarter when we start seeing some of these things go up. And I don't think we're going to be shutting down economies again like we have in the past. There may be certain, I think, micro economies that may happen. It may happen in a city or a small region, but we're not going to see it on a state-by-state basis. So I still think we're in kind of the start phase, and we're moving forward. I think that from a consumer perspective, and certainly from a political perspective, we are in an election year, that there's going to be a lot of pushback, and nobody's going to want to reclose an economy this year after, being closed down for, basically 2 months and getting back to that.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think, it's, my comment on top of that would be, we're all tired of cooking and doing dishes at this point, and restaurants have made some of those adjustments you've talked about, so hopefully we can
absolutely
carry that forward.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna bring Peter into the webinar via phone. He is unable to get connected. So Peter, do you want to take a minute and talk about the distribution side of this, Nicholas and Company, and just a quick intro on Peter. He's probably one of the most optimistic guys in the industry, participants. So let me give you a few minutes to just talk about Nicholas and Joe's perspective and how that shakes out for a big distribution company.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I'm sorry, as they blame, I'll just blame COVID and the virus, right? But hello, everyone. I'm sorry I can't see everybody's beautiful face, but I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody today and talk a little bit about our perspective with the ground, the shoes and boots on the ground, if you will. But just a little quick history on Nicholas and Company. Over 80-year-old company. My grandfather, an immigrant from Crete, Greece, came all the way over in the early turn of the century to work in the Kennecott copper mines, and then worked there for quite a while, and then eventually ended up getting into the bakery business. And since he was the youngest employee and the person that started is one of the young employment juniors, if you will, he was the one that was having to go and get the wheat and the flour from the railroad, and he would go down to the railroad station and pick those items up. And at that time, there was about 13 canneries up in North Utah that would bring down canned goods, mainly peaches and pears. And as he was unloading some of the bags of flour and rice, they'd be unloading the canned goods into the market for the retail and also for the chefs there. And some of these canned goods would actually roll off and fall off the carts. And so they discarded them. And he talked to the conductor because he got to know them. And they would say, Nicholas, what do he asked the guys, can I take these? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, Nicholas, what are you going to use them for? He goes, oh, I don't know. I'll reposition them. So they gave him the canned goods, and he would go home and soak the labels off and put his own little label on, and he'd show up at the bakery the next morning with, panini rolls and and bocce rolls and sweet rolls, and then he would present these canned goods as well. And the customers are like, "What's wrong with these?" "Oh, we have a little dent in them, something like that, but nothing. Give me 75 cents on the dollar." And that's where Nicholas and Company really started. And now it's one of the super regionals out in the West, and we're very honored to be a part of the DMA group. And it's now nice to see that we're going into our fourth generation and listen to all the stories and not forget our past. And I think that's really, really important. But I think, importantly right now is, just to touch a little bit on DMA is that, in the early 80s, Bob Sala had a vision to get a lot of the larger independent family businesses together and create a opportunity across the nation to service the food service industry. And it gave us an opportunity because at this time we didn't want to answer to Wall Street. We wanted to answer to Main Street. These family businesses wanted to continue to pass the legacy on, including Nicholas and Company and my grandfather. And I was blessed to come and work my way all the way up through the ranks, starting with building pallets in the back. But as DMA matured, families have changed, and we brought on members, and members have gone away. But it's been neat to see the one thing that we have is the family independence and the cultures that everybody brings together. And of course, now we have Pat leading the helm, who's been fantastic, who's a great leader and has been, born in the food service industry. So it's great that he has all this knowledge. It's been wonderful to see it come together. But I think, as we look now, and I reminisce with my father about what are some of the things they were concerned about, is, I said, Dad, how do you feel about Corona and this COVID situation? And he says, what was scary was not the wars, it was polio. And I had to sit back and think about that for a minute because polio, they didn't know how people were getting it, just like we didn't know how COVID was getting it, right? We know it spread through certain ways, and we have assumptions and things. But with polio, nobody knew. And then a year later, a friend of his contracted it, and it paralyzed him. And a year later, they found the cure. Well, that's what we need to do is find the cure. It's a bit scary out there, but I think, we need to look at this as an opportunity to work through it and make us better. And I think that's something that all of us have been challenged with. As Joe presented all these facts, nobody really knows at the end of the day. These are all assumptions. And so we need to make sure that we can pivot to the positive and make sure that, again, like this, like my father said, we'll get through this. We all will get through this. But we have to deal with it smart. And I think that it's important that we look at how we go about our business. And at the end of the day, the consumer, the end user, is going to be the biggest critic. So, we always joke in our family is that, we want to see people close their kitchens in their homes and eat out. And obviously they've had to reopen those kitchens and continue to take care of their families. But we also want to make sure that we're doing it safe and sound, and that we continue on, and that we're a good leader for the marketplace. And I think all of us on this call, in this webinar, have an opportunity. I think it's really important. Unfortunately, my grandfather in his broken English used to say, "Bring your face." He'd want to see the cadence of a person doing business with. And nowadays we're using webinars, which is ironic. But we're going to get through it. Again, it's creativity, right? So I think the innovations are going to be large, in part by what we're forced to do and deal with. I think first and foremost is to make sure we're taking care of our team members, and then making sure we're not making the public in harm's way, that they're scared, or a restaurateur is concerned about what happens when one of our drivers goes in, or how is the product handled in the warehouses, all the way to the suppliers, and how our manufacturers are working in their plants. So again, a lot of information, but a lot of this it changes every day, from the political realm down to how we operate our distribution centers and manufacturers, and how you as operators are operating your stores and educating, because I think we really need to continue to communicate. And as long as we're communicating and show people positive wins, we're seeing a lot of great wins out there. People won't be panicked, and they'll feel comfortable. And I think that's something that we want to continue to push forward. So Pat, that's a lot of information right there. And I think, Joe brings a lot of credibility to it. But again, these are assumptions, and it changes daily. So we have to be one step ahead of it and be good leaders.
Yeah, that's awesome, Peter. Thanks for the optimism. I introduced you as the optimist. I do think you and Joe both touched on it. We've never been through anything like this, and it's gonna carry on for. I think we can all look out the front window and see this being an issue for the next 12 to 18 months. So a reinvention of the business and a collaboration around all supporting each other in this industry. It's the way we built the industry, and so thank you for that. Let me start with a couple quick questions, and then we'll try to make these kind of rapid fire so we can get in as much as we can. For you, Joe, casual dining, fine dining, and the dining room itself, where the industry really, really grew over the years. Can those chains use their kitchens differently? Will they use their kitchens differently? Might they be closed 3 days a week and just do delivery out of their restaurants and be open? What kind of, are you hearing innovation in the dining room for the casual dine, fine dine folks?
Yeah, they're going to have to. I mean, there's no doubt about it. These guys were built, if you remember, when the casual dining, the heyday of casual dining, especially on the chain side, was in the 90s when people were, where they kind of trained people to go out to eat on Monday through Wednesday, Monday through Thursday, and that's not happening anymore. People just don't have time to do that anymore. So they have to reinvent their businesses. We've become much more of a off-premise business, and that's why fast casual has done so well. It has done so well during this, over the past, 10 or 15 years. Great quality food, casual dining food, but I get it quick and I can, get out of here really quickly. I can eat it on premise or take it out. I think that what they're going to do, and this is, again, we've been spitballing this at Technomic, but you can think of almost a modular type operation where maybe Monday through, it's Wednesday or Thursday, they have an operation that's much more dedicated to off-premise, and that they take more of their dining space towards an off-premise operation, that they may have to have special areas for packaging and so on and so forth, and have fewer seats. And then for the weekend, they retrofit it differently, very easy. They can do it on wheels or whatever way they can do it to make it more of an on-premise type location. So they're going to be able to, they need to have a lot more flexibility built into their operations to be, to do both be both a full service operation as well as more of a limited service operations during those non-peak full service occasion days. You can also see them, putting in drive-through windows at some point. I think that's something we can be seeing in the future. So I think those are some of the things that we should be looking out for, that they're going to have to be a lot more flexible in terms of how they operate. That again, maybe Monday through Wednesday, they have, instead of having, 30 tables, they have 10 tables, and the rest of the operation, they put up a wall, and it's all for takeout and delivery, and if they have a drive-through window. I think we could be seeing that in the future.
Thanks for that. I'm going to jump over to Peter. A question on, you talked a little bit about safety of the workforce, and for all of our restaurant customers that are on board here today, obviously they've had to repurpose their entire workforce, and job one for our customers is taking care of their workers even before you can reopen a restaurant or repurpose a restaurant. Peter, talk about safety in the distribution side.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. I think, first of all, perception's everything, right? I mean, whether you're going into a grocery store, walking down the street, going into a restaurant, and then obviously our distribution centers. I mean, some of the things that we all have to be cognizant is the people, right? So will call. I mean, we are assigning certain people only to will call areas. The warehouse operators have to be sanitized, and they're working in an environment where we're not letting people come in and do test kitchen demonstrations or tours where we were. Our drivers are gloved and masked. Now, we want them to be safe, especially going into the back of the restaurants where everything is being made prepped. It's important. We're following the CDC because I think that's going to be the closest level of example and information that we can get to educate our members as we do company webinars and talk about the steps or what's going on in the industry and then of course in the world and how we go about this. So I think we have a duty to our fellow person, if you will, about being safe. I mean, as we say in Greek, there's a saying, the fish rots from the head down. We as leaders and owners and operators we're all in these decision-making processes. We've got to lead by example. And it is a bit unorthodox, if you will, is how we go about our business. But still, at the end of the day, we sell beans for a living. We're selling product. We're selling live bacterial organisms. We're selling product that has integrity and quality that we want to make sure that by the time it gets to the end user, customer or consumer likes it, is going to come back. So again, we want to make sure that we follow the food chain all the way from the kill, if it's a slaughter or if it's picked and produce, all the way through our delivery system and then to the back of the restaurant. And we're hoping that we have helped educate restaurateurs the same thing. And then, obviously making sure that we're kind of explaining this to not only our team members, but to the public, because we're kind of the silent majority of massive industry, but we're really not recognized like the retail side of things. And that's by design, is that we want to make sure we're doing right by the restaurateur, because this is a $308 billion plus industry, and people need food, and they need to make sure that we're doing our part and being responsible all the way through that chain to make sure that we're carrying out the best ways during these critical times to make sure it is safe. So, Pat, that's where I would say, and I would hope that I would echo some of our fellow DMA members.
Yeah, when Joe talks about kind of, again, the starting line, and I come back to you on that, Peter, if you're at the starting line right now, maybe talk a little bit about, days a week and numbers of deliveries, one driver in a truck, healthcare drops for distributors that are on a dock, left somewhere touchless. I mean, talk about some of those changes and how you think about owning and running, you and Nicole running your business the next few years. Are those permanent changes for you, or do you see this just continuing to evolve along with the customer?
Well, again, I mean, I think you go back to the basics. I mean, I think back about when my grandfather was, taking labels off of cans and selling them, and then it evolves into a major broadliner. It started with an idea, and it started with, how do I become better and innovative? I think this comes all the way to present. I mean, we've been forced to do things maybe that were in 3 years ago, planned in 3 years ago, that we're doing them now, forcing IT to get certain things, whether it's internal or external, with our customers and touch points. I think, you have to right size your business. Everybody in this is up against the situation. I mean, first and foremost is our team members, right? So in a situation where, you may lose 50% of your business, what do you do? Are you laying off people? Are you furloughing them? Are you repositioning? I mean, those are the things that first and foremost that we did, and many have. And so I think that's something that you have to look and say, hey, listen, we're a viable resource and supply to the supply chain out there. We need to be relevant, but it takes a toll. I mean, we may have to reduce our days and our window times. Why? Because if we don't have the people to do that, that's a critical part of servicing that customer, because they need that product. So it's understanding, again, as I said, communicating to them and saying, hey, listen, I know you were getting 5 days a week or 4 days a week, or 2 days a week delivery. We need to rethink this. We need to rethink the window times. Maybe we're delivering at night and we're going to do a key drop, and I know a lot of the people on the phone will do this already, because it's a less of a touch point, right? Or it's isolated to 1 or 2 drivers, right? Salesperson, same thing. Are they prepped to go into a facility? Obviously communicating on how they approach that facility. Temperatures, I mean, we all have to temp. We temp everybody coming into our Nicholson company. I mean, every healthcare we service, they're temping. We have customers that temp. We have to be responsible for that. And that's where it starts, at that front line is where it is. And, obviously the doctors and nurses are rock stars, but so are our drivers and our warehouse operations people. And so do the counter people at the restaurants and the servers. So that's where we really need to be cognizant of what goes on. And I do think we just have to be smart. We can't have a race to the bottom. I mean, everybody wants a good deal and a price, and of course, but it takes a lot of capital to run an industry like that. And we've got to make sure is when you get, one arm cut, you've got to make sure you tourniquet and be smart about it so you can come back stronger and better. And I believe that. I mean, I will definitely tell you, Pat, that I believe a lot of good businesses will come, and even family businesses that, I speak with, are going to become out of this a lot better and stronger for it. I mean, they are going to really look at themselves and say, what can we do better as an employer or as a community service and giving back? I mean, when this thing went down, I can't even tell you the amount of hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars that we're donating, seriously, of product to whether it's a church community or the food banks or the industry itself for restaurateurs, taking product out of casinos and getting with restaurateurs and using their kitchens, using our trailers to help refrigerate and cool. I mean, getting very creative. And these are not ideas that I came up with. These are ideas that our team members came up with, you know, and then you talked a little bit about the restaurant tour and how do they self-distance. You know, I've got a couple of customers that actually did full life-size mannequin dummies, did them in tuxedos. They're fine dining restaurants. Fantastic. I mean, you really didn't feel weird about it. And it was really unique. Somebody did teddy bears. You get really creative, right? So we have a social responsibility, and we're going to weather through this storm. But I do think we're going to come out better about this. And also, it does force all of us to be cleaner about how we go about our business. You know, a cleaner world, cleaner restaurants, cleaner distribution centers, cleaner everything. We just need to be cognizant about that and look back internally. So I do think, again, it goes back to that communication is how is the step-by-step processes to the end user.
Yeah, that's I'm going to come back to you on a follow-up question in a second. I want to get to a couple of questions we're getting from our audience here, and I'm going to turn this one over to Joe. You know, the past couple of weeks, 60+% is the number of restaurant purchases being consumed at home, according to you know, a number of the studies. So, you know, people are using the restaurant and bringing it home or eating it in the car, but not consuming. What's that number going to look like January 1st of next year, Joe?
I'd say probably 55.
So you think the dining rooms will get a little bit more traffic, but this food away from home, taken home is real. I mean,
absolutely, no doubt about it. Yes, I think.
And then I'll give you one more quick question. This is something you brought up earlier too. That you know, the food service industry, we've always competed head-to-head with retail. When you and I started this business 30 years ago, we had 40 cents on a dollar or 45 cents on a dollar, and we got it up to where restaurants and food away from home was over 50 cents on a dollar. And, you know, you made the point that we just lost 30 years. How long is it going to take the entrepreneurial spirit of the restaurant and food away from home to get that share back?
It's going to take some time. You know, we think the industry will get back to, on a real basis, in a best case scenario, 2023. That's the best case scenario. Probably more realistically, 2025. Now, for limited service, it can happen as quickly as 2021. I mean, that's, you know, that's the good news. The problem is you've got segments like full service independents that are really taking a hit. This is the one we're really concerned about relative to where, you know, we're going to see a lot of closures. You know, we think there's going to be about 110,000 fewer restaurants by the end of 2021 than were at the end of 2019. And that's off of a base of about 700,000 restaurants at the end of 2019. So that's a pretty big drop. And a lot of that's going to come out of the height of independent full service restaurants. So it's going to take a while, but entrepreneurial spirit within this industry, again, I hate to be a Debbie Downer on all this, but certainly entrepreneurial spirit's going to come back here. We're going to see a lot of new things. There's a lot of innovation that comes from our industry, and we're going to see it being built back up and even stronger. And we're going to see things that consumers really want. And that's going to be the good news that comes out of, you know, the silver lining that comes out of this situation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's optimistic. If we can get 3 to 5 years down the road and grab 20 years of share, we kind of lost that. It's, you know,
right.
Us the gain. I did hear Tom Benet this week. He's now the CEO of the National Restaurant Association, the NRA, and one of his comments was that the workers in restaurants, you know, more than 50% got furloughed or let go during the March 10th period. You were talking about March 10 to March 15, and it's come and it will come back, and we're going to put those people back to work because this is an industry that's resilient and I would say, you know, even more entrepreneurial than ever.
And I'll be honest too. You know, we probably had too many restaurants before this. You know, this is probably not the right way to reduce the number of restaurants. We were oversaturated. You know, we've talked about that for a couple of years. You know, given the restaurants per capita that we had, we're probably cutting too deep right now based on the losses. But it'll come back to some point of equilibrium in the next 3 to 4 or 5 years.
Great. Peter, back to you. You kind of made a little bit of a plea to our customer base, to our chain customer base, to be patient with us around deliveries, drivers. One big question for you is the reduction of capacity at suppliers, some suppliers moving their business away from food service into retail in the short term. It's affected our ability as distributors to deliver our customers, the kinds of service level they've expected over the last 10 years. What are your comments in terms of when operators can and will help us improve our service level to customers?
Yeah, Pat, I mean, obviously a good question. We're all fighting with it now. We all have really nice, vendor suppliers we've had many years and relationships. They go deep and they go wide. Being a true partner, I mean, the big ask from the customers that we're speaking with is if you spec something, if you're whatever which item it may be and we're struggling as the distributor because we're not making it. We need to, as a distributor, own part of the process. But we because we are distributing, want to make sure the manufacturer is getting our fill rates to the appropriate percentage that the customer needs. And our ask is that we're reaching out to have you help us is to get with that vendor supplier. So it's a win-win-win all the way around and saying, listen, we've showed you our history. Here's where we're at. Because I will tell you this. I mean, I hear Joe's comments on, the resurgence of the restaurants, but there are some restaurants out there and concepts are just blowing the doors off of product and consumers are just eating it up, no pun intended. And so we're having to go back to suppliers and say, hey, listen, you predicted a 12% increase. These guys are close to 30, and they're rocking and rolling. We need to make sure that we're taking care of them because we're getting measured, if you will, about compliance. And it really hamstrings us if all of a sudden they're expecting XYZ percentage and we're delivering, a third of that or whatever it may be because we can't get product because of allocation. And I think that's where the customer, the consumer, and the restaurateur can really help us and sit down saying, hey, where are you guys with this? Here's our expectations we're going to see. I think with the summer months, people are in better spirits. They are getting out more. They're tired of being pent up. Every state is different. Every state is a little bit runs differently. And I think that, those, we can't just, kind of globally make a statement and say, hey, I need to be here. I need to have this much on compliance. I think it's really concept by concept and state by state because we have to work within those regulations. I mean, you go back to the drivers, the trucks are loaded, right? And we may have certain days that we have to negotiate with, but they only have so many hours of service that they can run. And, I don't think anybody is going to have their drivers get in trouble because they overran those hours. I mean, it's a federal law. So what we're trying to do is work smart and trying to optimize that and ask, the customers to say, hey, listen, this is where we really need the help. And I think the suppliers have been pretty good for the most part. I mean, as far as the receiving comes in, I mean, obviously they're struggling with the fill rate. But the one thing that's not going to go away, Pat, is food service. It's just not. I mean, retail is out there. But even during this whole problem with the pandemic, we were helping out retail because there was product, they just couldn't fill shelves fast enough. So they were looking at food service to say, hey, when applicable, can you load us up with product? And so, I mean, that was great. We built some great partnerships out of that. But I just that would be kind of our ask with our customer partners.
Thanks, Peter. I'm going to apologize because we're coming close to the end of this quick hour, and way more questions than we're able to get answered here. Joe, one last one for you. The number bandied about that all of us are seeing is 10 to 15% of restaurants have closed. People have projected that number to be 20 or 25. Do you guys at Technomic feel like you've got a good handle on this, or is this all dependent on outdoor dining, the continued spread of COVID? I mean, obviously those things are out ahead of us, but where does it all settle out? We'll get through this, as Peter said earlier. Where's it all settle out on restaurant closures?
Yeah, I think, I said the 110,000, and it's over a 2-year period because I think there's going to be people that will keep pushing on and realize next year that, even though we may start recovery next year, that it's just they're not going to be able to do it. We're still in scenario period right now. There's a lot of unknowns. I mean, the virus is kind of dictating how things are going to occur, and progress on therapies and or a vaccine are going to dictate how the industry goes. If in 2 weeks they say we've got a vaccine and we've got 330 million doses of it, and we can have it administered within 2 weeks, I think we've got a great story, and we're not going to lose as many restaurants. But if they say that doesn't happen till the end of 2021, we've got a different story. But we've got different scenarios for that. I think our middle case scenario that we're saying right now, which is kind of in between, is like 110,000 restaurants. Now, if you look at probably where we should have been, where to get to an equilibrium basis, before all of this happened, when we talk about saturation in the industry, we probably could have shaved maybe, I'd say 30 to 45,000 restaurants anyways. So this just accelerates and then cuts a little bit too much deep, but we'll gain those back over time to where we get to I think a nice place relative to restaurants that are offering the right products, innovation, and the right experiences that consumers are looking for. And I think we're going to see some reinvention. And I think, also, again, the silver lining is that we're seeing a lot of operators pivoting and doing it's accelerating what consumers want anyways, which is more off-premise and a better experience around off-premise. And we're seeing a lot of that happening right now.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. Jeanette, if you would put up our closing thoughts here, I wanted to share a couple of things that, in preparing for this webinar with Joe and with Peter, we talked about getting through, a lot of stuff in a 1 hour period. I think these are things we would toss out as things to think about. Winning in the 3D world, which is drive-through, delivery, and digital, and the fourth D might be if you don't, you're going to dissolve. I mean, it might be, to Joe's point earlier, we're in this for the next 18 months, and food's going to be consumed away from the restaurant. So figuring out how to get into that, away from home, really critical. 3 R's, we didn't talk about this we didn't have time to talk about this, but in the environment and on the manufacturing side, the last 15 or 20 years, we've made great strides in this industry, and reusable, recyclable, post-combustible, repurposing product and using it, and now overnight that's been replaced by single-use packaging, use it and toss it. So, these are big changes, especially for the non-foods providers. I believe chains are going to go to self-delivery. The Uber Eats and DoorDash model is so threatening to chain restaurants. I didn't have time to ask you about this, Joe, but I just believe any chain that is doing well, that's part of their brand. Chains know how to operate. That's what they do at the core. They're great operators. The pizza guys figured it out a long time ago and have done great, and now everybody else is in the to-go game. So, I think it's going to force DoorDash and Uber Eats to either be a friend of the restaurant chains, or they're going to get replaced by self-delivery. Food away from home, I talked about earlier. I think it's food away from home, at home. The cessation of brands and locations, I think Joe hit on that, and we asked him the question. Peter talked about it a little bit too. There's just going to be fewer restaurants and fewer brands here. And last but not least, this term that's come up in the last couple of weeks is, on the reopening of restaurants, is about having a restaurant that is hospital clean, quote unquote, and taking care of your workers. So, I think all of us that have ventured out and eaten out here in the last couple of weeks as restaurants have reopened have probably found very different experiences from restaurant to restaurant in terms of the worker safety and cleanliness and repurposing of a restaurant. So I know that's a big challenge for restaurants right now. So just some thoughts on closing. I want to thank Peter and Joe so much for doing this with us. It's our first convening of industry experts. We plan to continue this. The Food Institute's been a terrific host for us. Apologize for us having a little bit of technical difficulty getting our friends from Salt Lake City on the phone, or Las Vegas, wherever you're at today, Peter. But I want to just throw out, Jeanette, if you'll flip the next slide. We've got our second in the series scheduled for the 20th of July. This is going to be much more around the collaboration in the supply chain. Mike Sweet's going to host it for us. Mike's the CEO of Benny Keith Foods in Dallas, and Tom Benet's been gracious enough to offer to join, and Mark Allen and Larry Obergfell as well on the right and left. These are three of the industry leaders for our association. So I think we'll talk more about the worker, the strength of the industry, and how each of these sectors are really reacting to what's, a very crazy time for us. Jonathan Mays is part of restaurant business editor there, and very, very in tune with the chain restaurant side of the business and who's winning and losing and how they're moving. So we'll let Jonathan kick it off, and then those three gentlemen will continue on. So thank you again to all for participating. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your questions, but we'll look forward to continuing this series and taking it down a path where hopefully we bring Peter's optimism and Joe's pragmatism to these calls, and we'll continue on. So thank you very much, everybody. Stay safe. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Be safe. God bless.